Committee meeting of Wednesday, February 20th. I'm joined with my esteemed colleague, Greg Smith. That's a quorum, so we can do business on the committee and its agenda, as you've all seen the agenda. First, I would like to take Mr. Smith 1, 5, and 8 on consent. So moved, 1, 5, and 8. And now, out of order, we want to take motion 6. Could we read what motion 6 is?
Item number 6, motion, Rosendahl Hahn, relative to naming a portion of 98th Street between Sepulveda Westway and Sepulveda Eastway as Howard B. Drollinger Way.
Yeah, I would like to invite Karen Dial, who is the daughter of Howard Drollinger, and the others who would like to speak if they filled out cards. They filled out cards. Okay, we got one from Robert Ackerman, and of course from Karen Dial. And Mickey, no? Okay, all right. We're going to start with you, Karen, and just for the record and full disclosure, Howard Drollinger was a huge community leader and a treasure of Westchester, a gentleman that had his heart and his soul and his passion and his vision in making Westchester a better place for all of us to live. One of the joys I had as a candidate was meeting him and his daughter and then getting to know them and having the opportunity to serve them as their council member for a period of years. On a very personal note, Howard looked like my father, and he was in his early 80s when I got to meet him. I was fortunate enough to surprise him on his birthday a year ago or so, whenever it was, in June, with a certificate wishing him a happy birthday. But unfortunately, like all of us, he has passed on, and I'm sure if there is a God in heaven, that's where he's at. And so we want to name a street in honor of what a great man he is, and to speak on his behalf is his daughter, Karen Dial Drollinger. Karen.
Thank you, Bill. First of all, I'd just like to say that our entire family is very supportive of this decision to name a street in my dad's honor. And I know if he were with us today, he'd be a little embarrassed by it all, but I think that he is very deserving of this street naming. He built Westchester to what it is today, a thriving community, to work, play, and live. He also spent 60 years of his life doing this, and it's very fitting that we would name a street in his honor. Also, the street is in an area that he developed called the Westchester. It's a Westchester Village area, but it has a Ralph's Market, Long, Starbucks. It's quite a community gathering place, and wonderful places to eat. Blockbuster, Petco. He built this area himself. He developed it himself, and it was his idea, so it's just perfect. My dad was also on the Zoning Board of Appeals for years. He was on the board of the Union Rescue Mission, which was a very organization very near and dear to his heart. Huge supporter of that organization. They were even in his will. He was a founder of the Westchester Vitalization Corp. And one of his wishes is that I continue to be on that board, which is something I'm doing today. He was also an honorary mayor of Westchester years ago, I believe in the 60s. I remember when I was a little kid he was at. It was pretty cool. So I really appreciate this, and if my other family members were here with me today, they'd say the same thing. So I'm very happy this is going to happen. Thank you for letting it go.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate your comments. Your father will always be remembered by all of us who've had the pleasure of working with him and knowing him, and he was a huge treasure to our great city.
Thank you.
Robert Ackerman, Flight Path Learning Center.
Yes,
hello, Robert.
Hi, good afternoon, Councilman Smith. My name is Robert Ackerman, and I'm a 36-year resident of Westchester, and was also a very good friend of Howard Drollinger, who was my sponsor in Rotary, and he was definitely one of the pillars of our community. One of the great things that we have in Westchester is something called the Flight Path Learning Center at LAX, and if you've seen the two visits of the A380, our museum had hosted that. It's a great partnership between the community and the airport. So if you have a chance Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 3, please come visit. With Howard's passing, we thought it was appropriate that something be done in the community to honor and provide a tribute to him. And renaming a street we thought was a really good idea, particularly right in the heart of the business district. 89th Street is a very short street in the central business district. It goes 2 blocks. There's very few businesses won't be affected by the street renaming. We find it also appropriate, too, because when Howard built the Westchester Village that Karen just described with our Ralph supermarket, and it's been a very successful venture, he provided some land frontage on the property for some of our flight path plaques that honor aviation luminaries such as Donald Douglas, Howard Hughes, and we even have plaques for Mines Field. And it's been his support from Flight Path that helped us not only build the Flight Path portion of embedding plaques in the sidewalk honoring aviation aerospace pioneers, but also his financial support and his participation on our advisory committee that got us to the point in 2003 where we were actually able to open up the Learning Center at LAX. And Howard had so much influence in the community, good influence in terms of supporting the YMCA, the Airport Marina Counseling Service, so many organizations that have benefited from his participation, and certainly this would be a great way to honor him. Our goal is to have the honor on his birthday, June 16th.
Now you can finish.
Okay, thank you. And it's actually very appropriate, not only at his birthday, but this year will be the 99th annual Rotary International Convention, and this naming ceremony will happen at the time, so some of his Rotary friends will be there. And Howard was known not just in this city, but also throughout the country and probably around the world as Mr. Westchester. When people wanted to know who the go-to person was, it was Howard. We appreciate your support for this motion. Thank you to Councilman Rosendahl and Councilwoman Hahn for sponsoring it.
Thank you both very much for your comments. Mr. Smith, any questions or comments? No. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Thank you so much. It's moved and second, and we'll go for the full council. Look forward to June 16th in the ceremony.
Thank you.
June 16th.
Thank you both very much. Very much. Mr. Smith, if I could, there's one card on item number 7. There's a whole lot of cards on item number 2. Mm-hmm. And what I thought I would do is number 7, just get that over with and then go back.
You're the boss.
Okay, so if that works, let's do item number 7. And we do have Ural Kramer who wants to talk about that, and we'll have you speak right after Bureau of Street Services and CLA make their comments.
Item number 7, motion Rosendahl Smith relative to instructing the Bureau of Street Services to report on the status of citing permits for the coordinated street furniture program elements and any issues which need to be immediately addressed in related matters.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lance Owishi with the Bureau of Street Services. I'm the contract administrator for the Coordinated Street Furniture Program. Before you have a report regarding the status of our program and progress made since Council took action on January 15th. Actually, the numbers that are represented in the report that were prepared last week have changed because as each day went by, we were actually getting additional sites approved.
Great.
So actually, we've had 99 sites approved since January 15th. And this is in comparison to the last 2 years, which we only had 105 sites approved overall. So in a matter of a month, we've almost surpassed what we tried to do over 2 years. We continue to meet with the various council offices and several of the community constituent-based groups to try to negotiate or find resolution on some of the sites. And we are hopeful at this point that we will procure all the needed permits by the March 15th submittal date.
Will all be done? No more to do?
We hope so. We hope so. We are still meeting with various community groups, like I said. In your own district, we have to meet with Brentwood next week, so, but we hope we can find some additional spots for them, and they seem very, very amenable to meeting with us. So.
Yeah, they're very amenable. They don't want to do San Vicente, but there's other streets they
Correct.
think make sense to do it. I know you've been meeting with my neighborhood council people. You've been driving the streets. Various members of my staff have been part of it. Have you gotten the same cooperation from District 4, 5, and 13?
4 and, let's see, I was just kind of adding this up a little bit. Council District 4 has approved 23 out of 42 requested sites, or 42 required sites within their district. Council District 3 right now, they've approved a dozen sites. We've met with their Hollywood Entertainment bid and Hollywood Media District bid, both. Let's see. Council District 2 that didn't really need anything, they've approved 21 sites. Council District 5, they needed 180 sites total. We haven't actually gotten anything approved through them in the last month, but we are meeting with their
How
staff.
many of the 180 have they done so far?
None so far.
None.
None so far.
And that's since the beginning of the program, 2.5 years
Oh,
ago?
no. That's just since January. So,
Since January, they've had 180.
right, that we're
That
trying
you were looking
to
at.
catch their district up with
Are
the
you
rest of the city.
hopeful?
I'm hopeful. I can say that, sure.
Remember, we're talking about hope these days and change. Some people are. Okay, will there be a report back on those 180 somewhere in the
Sure.
near moment?
Actually, per the previous council motion, I guess we have to come back on March 15th, and so we'll be preparing another report at that time to bring us up to speed exactly where we're at. And like I said, this last month, it's been a flurry of activity. We've never seen so much involvement with the various council offices, which has been great. And so we're trying to meet and move with the community groups and find consensus. And we hope to continue that for the next month and finish up the program and get the rest of the permits.
Appreciate it. I received the Dakota guy with a smile. First time I've seen that. Do you want to make any comment? Did you? You fine? Everything okay? Okay, before we move on this, Yul Kramer, come up. Mr. Smith, do you want to ask him any questions, please?
Just clarify, under the new rules and CD5, if they choose not to comment, then we go forward, right?
Correct. My understanding of the council motion that was on the table back in January was that whatever we don't reach consensus on by March 15th will then be brought before the board, and before the council, and the full council will then take the action to approve everything carte blanche that was not negotiated before that date. And so whether or not CD5 hits that goal of 180 sites by March 15th, if we don't reach that through mutual consensus, the whole city council can then take the action to approve the sites for the better good of the whole city.
Just a question on that, mechanics-wise, have you been meeting with the staff, looking at potential locations to see if there are any opportunities there?
Yes, we have. We've gone to 2 neighborhood council meetings so far. We are continuing the discussions with the staff. We've basically been working in the area south of Mulholland. We hopefully will meet with their deputies and they're in charge of the area north of Mulholland soon, and we'll reach some type of consensus.
Okay, so we look forward to the final report,
I sure, yes.
and that'll come before us, before it goes before council?
I'm not sure how the timing of that is going to work
It
out.
would have to, if you're submitting a report, it gets referred to committee unless committee chooses to waive that next report.
Yeah, that'll depend on what you put in that report, if we need to deal with it or not, okay?
So we'll work with the city clerk's office. to get
And
the
we have
report
a
submitted.
place on the council, right, for action?
Not as of yet, no.
It's too far out.
Too far out.
Okay, great. Before we move, Yul, come on up. And these are general comments on item number 7.
Yeah.
State your name for the record.
Yuval Kramer. I live in CD5, and I just became a board member of the Mid-City West Neighborhood Council. I represent homeowners. I went to the meeting. We had one meeting on the street furniture, and I didn't like the way it was handled. We were only given the list of the locations right before the meeting started. There were no copies to be distributed to the people at the meeting. We were passing around one copy of the locations, so no decision could be made that evening, and we're going to have to meet again on it. I also was surprised because I thought street furniture meant bus shelters, and I was surprised about the number of kiosks and the number of pillars. And looking into it further, I'm quite upset about the pillars because they are, I don't know if you know about the dimensions, they're 6 feet wide and 15 to 18 feet tall, which is totally out of character with my neighborhood. They're monstrous. And as far as I've heard, the only city that has them around here is San Francisco in California. So no other cities around. So I don't know who in the city of Los Angeles approved those kinds of dimensions. I mean, I've seen cylinders at the Grove, and I've seen them at the Beverly Center, and, nothing like that. And so it's just, to me, also CD5 is getting, the whole city is getting 160 pillars. CD5 is getting 80 of them. I think it's totally unfair that CD5 is getting half of the pillars. And I think that's, they're just being dumped on CD5. And the number of my neighborhood council is getting 19 pillars. We're getting 38 kiosks. I'd personally like no pillars because I just think it's going to define the neighborhood and it's going to overwhelm the streetscapes. And I'd like a reduction in the kiosks. CD5 is getting 22% of the kiosks in the city of Los Angeles. I'd like more bus shelters in exchange for that. And I'd like the deadline, the mid-March deadline, to be moved further into the future so that more people can be given notice, so that there can be more transparency, and so that people can have a chance to weigh in on this, because a lot of people, as they're finding out about this, are quite upset about it.
Would you respond?
Certainly. I think what we have to do is kind of reconstruct a little history here, and the fact that we have been, in fact, meeting with community groups since 2002 when the program first rolled out. So, although maybe some of the neighborhood councils were not formally created at that point in time, we did meet with neighborhood associations and others, and so there are folks within the community that are familiar with the program. As we're finding out, there are, as new and additional people come into the discussion, for some of them it is in fact the first time they may have heard of it. But what we're trying to do at this point in time, because we have such a foreshortened time frame, is when we meet with these community groups, we are coming to them saying, this is what has been set before us by council, and this is what we're trying to accomplish. We are then setting up subsequent tours with the various constituent groups to go and look at the sites that we're proposing, and then at that point in time, within a 30-day period, the group can come back then and say, look, we looked at the sites out in the field, and we've approved of sites A, B, and C, and we reject X, Y, and Z. And then within that 30-day period, we hopefully have the number of permits that we require for that particular area. In relation to the number of pillars that we're actually asking for within CD5, it's only 35, it's not 80. But we are asking for additional packs within the council district. And, what the contract allows us that flexibility to move certain furniture elements around. We did try to split up the transit shelter because that is, in fact, a public amenity that most council districts wanted to have. And so basically established a threshold of about 85 shelters per district. And CD5 has been asked to approve 85 sites as well. They only have about 45 or 48 sites approved to this point for transit shelters. So we are trying to pursue that with them and work within the prescribed timeframe set before us for the council
I
action.
appreciate you responding to the citizens' public comment card. What I'd like you to do is get with the gentleman from his neighborhood council. You mentioned the word flexibility as to what we put where and how we do it. That resonates with me, and I'm sure resonates with him about flexibility on that. And so I want to report back in 2 weeks just to give us an update.
Certainly.
So I'd like to know how CD5 feels at that point, and if they need an extension while we move forward with it, we'll certainly consider that as an option if it makes sense to do. Sir.
I just wanted, if you could ask the gentleman to address the inconsistency, because the 80 number I got from the spreadsheet that was online,
you just
and
said
he said 35.
Right.
And you'll pull aside after this
Right.
discussion here and have that discussion with you,
Okay.
and hopefully you'll be comfortable about
Okay.
it. Okay, so we'll have a report back in 2 weeks to the committee.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. It's item number 7. Now, Jim, are you going to stay for the rest of the meeting, or do you want to get yours over with, Jim Mcquisten? Item 3. You want to hear the rest of it? Because we
Well-
got a stack.
Item 2
You're going to be involved in that, too?
is most of it, and all I'm going to say is item 3, remember what I said in item 2. So.
All right, then we'll just, we'll hold you, Jim. Appreciate what you just said. Okay. All right.
you teach
so,
that to some of
Adam,
our
bring us up
colleagues
to
on the
date.
council?
We have 2, and we have,
2, 3, 4. Yeah, so we got so far 2, 3, and 4.
2, 3, and 4. Okay. All right. We'll start with number 2. Bill, do you want to kick it off? give us a,
Item number 2, Bureau of Street Services report relative to a point of sale plan for sidewalk repair and related matters.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Smith, Bill Robertson, Director of the Bureau of Street Services. I'm going to invoke my rights under the Fifth Amendment, and I am well pleased. I jokingly say that, but for the first time in almost 10 years, there is a discussion about the policy, sidewalk policy in the city of Los Angeles. Our goal and the instructions of the council was not to come up with a policy, but to look at various options that may be available to the city. One of those was the point of sale policy. That policy would require homeowners at the time of sale of their property to repair their sidewalks. Some of the recommendations contained in our report line out how that policy would be in effect, how we would move through it. It has various options that the council can look at. This is by no means stating that point of sale is the only way to go. The key here is to have a discussion among the policy makers of the city to address one of the critical issues of sidewalk in the city of Los Angeles. As I've said many times before, with over 4,600 miles of damaged sidewalk in the city, and we pay out approximately $3 million a year in liability claims as a result of trip and fall incidences, something needs to be done. In 2000-2001, we were funded for our first sidewalk repair program under the general fund. We have been as high as 118 miles, but naturally as the economic situation and the state finances affect what we do in the city, our program now is only at 52 miles, and as you know, Mr. Rosendahl, that's 83 years. That's 83 years to fix our sidewalk. So I am here this morning. I can certainly outline this program, but I think we would be better served if the committee would allow me to have public comment, because there is a great deal of public comment, and I am well pleased that there is a discussion among the public, whether it be the real estate industry, our neighborhood councils, and others. The key fact here is that the city of Los Angeles, under the Streets and Highways Code, starting back in 1911, we used to cite property owners who had damaged sidewalk. That was the policy of the city until 1973. The policy issue here is, do we go back to that? Do we frame a new policy structured around that? But one of the key issues is that no matter what we do, especially as it pertains to the 1911 Act and holding the adjacent property owner responsible, is what's going to trigger an inspection. Certainly with 4,600 miles of damaged sidewalk, if I went out and inspected it all and forced property owners to start making repairs, it just wouldn't happen. There's not enough skilled labor. There's not enough Portland concrete cement. It just isn't feasible to do that. However, there has to be some other type of trigger that would start that inspection process. Now, whether it's a point of sale, whether it's a claim filed against the city at that point in time, whether it is a request from someone regarding damaged sidewalk. At that time, the city could make an inspection and then cite the adjacent property owner. The reality is that no matter what we do, the city is always going to be responsible. We're always going to be held liable, whether we put it back on the property owner or whether we accept full responsibility. State law says, and the courts have found, the cities are liable, regardless of what your local ordinance may say. So the liability issue is moot. The city is responsible. The fact becomes now, do we want to accept the burden of $1.2 billion to erase this backlog, or do we want to go back to the 1911 Act and have the property owners share in that cost when they sell the home? We can go out and cite them today and take their money, or we can wait until they sell their homes when they have available funding to go ahead and pay that. Now, you're going to hear, there's a lot of discussion. The average cost is about $3,500 per property. You're going to hear that may affect the sales of homes because it's an additional cost. The reality is we're already requiring property owners to use low flush toilets, gas shutoff valves, double pane glass on sliding doors. The city is already requiring them to take many actions before they can sell their home. The other issue that we discussed in the committee, and one that I know that the real estate industry is upset with, is the fact that what if somebody has a 30-day escrow? The reality is that you do not start looking at what you need to take care of at the beginning of escrow. It's when you place your home on the market and you're working with that realtor then advises you of the necessary steps that you must take in order to sell your property in Los Angeles. So at that point in time, that's when the individual, whether he chooses to have the city do it or he wants to contract it on his own, and in today's market, which is very, very slow, and our figures are based on the slump, August, September, and October, the market, we feel that we are at the bottom or near the bottom. And their homes are not selling, going on the market like they did a few years ago and selling in 3 or 4 days. They're staying on the market 30 days, maybe 45 days, or even 60 days or longer, which gives the property owner ample opportunity to address some of the issues that we discuss in the report. So, if I may, if I can defer to our speakers and let them bring up some issues, and then I can come back and address some of those issues and how we plan to look at that. I know one other key factor is how do we hire the people if this program takes off? The reality is if we stop the current sidewalk program, that's $9 million. I have over 116 employees that could be moved into this program. So there would be no additional cost to the city because they would now become a special funded group, and the city would have $9 million of general fund money to spend elsewhere on other services. So with that, if I may, if you would like to.
The thing I'd like to ask is,
Sure.
When we first had this discussion, and you said over 80 years, of course, that was enough for me to say, let's figure out something else, because we are the ones liable, and we end up in closed session dealing with issues like that. Though most homeowners, bought the house, and somebody planted those lovely ficuses, among other things, and created all kinds of issues for people that now have those homes. We talked to Ms. Smith and I about a process that would be inclusionary with subcommittees and committees and over a period of time. Just tell us the time frame you did and how inclusive you were in that process.
Yes, what we did is we created 4 subcommittees that would take a look. One of those subcommittees was the program structure, how it was going to be structured, the program. Legal issues, ordinance changes. Workforce development was key. We felt that if this program should take off, there would be a real opportunity to take unskilled individuals and teach them a trade. And then the final group was the outreach group, which actually hasn't done anything yet because we're still in the policy stages. So once we move further and we need more feedback, then we will take that group and put them out. But all the members of the subcommittee, I want to thank them for their hard work. Our real estate folks that participated, Dr. Shoup from UCLA, the mayor's office, council offices, the other city departments. I want to thank them for their investment and staff time attending these meetings. We tried to meet every 2 weeks. And I tried to attend as many of those meetings as I could. I think we gathered a lot of information in a very short period. We started in August. We had an original orientation meeting for anybody that wanted to participate. And then we tried to finalize it by early January so that we could get a first report back to the committee to get further input from you to where we needed to go with the process.
Yeah, a lot of questions, actually. And first of all, I'm a little unhappy that when we set to do this some 4 or 5 years ago, we established a working group that was to include the major opponents to this with the San Fernando Valley Board of Realtors. They were not part of this working group, nor was anybody from the San Fernando Valley. As I looked down at the only representative from the Valley was CD2. There was no representation whatsoever of the San Fernando Valley, any of the stakeholders. Neighbor councils were not included anywhere. The Valley Board of Realtors was not included. And so I'm a little concerned about the stakeholders that were chosen and why. So I have.
And if I could, Mr. Smith,
Please.
we invited those folks. We reached out to them and wanted them to participate. But for some reason or another, the contacts that we made, there was no participation. There was no getting back to us that we would have loved to have had them in there. So that was unfortunate, and I agree with you, because we were really counting on the Valley to play a huge role in what was discussed here. And I know that my staff contacted the San Fernando Board numerous times, and we got no response from any individual that wanted to participate with us. So that was unfortunate.
I find that hard to believe, and I mean, I don't ever question you, but I find it hard to believe because I discussed it with them 4 years ago, and they were chomping at the bits to do this. So I'm kind of surprised, and I think they're here, and we'll hear from there. But let me ask you just some technical questions. What happens in the case of foreclosure? And we got a lot of those going on right now.
Yeah, and that's a policy issue. When that home reverts back to the lender, do you then require the lender at that point in time to repair the sidewalks, or do you wait until they subsequently sell the home to somebody else? At that time, it would again fall under a sale. So again, that's a policy issue. Our recommendation would be that once the home actually goes back on the market again and is sold at that point in time,
The new owner.
the lender would be responsible.
The lender,
The lender.
not the new owner.
No, not the new owner.
And the city attorney says we can do that under the,
Again, unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of input from the city attorney because of issues that they had in attending some of the meetings. But these, again, there's still a lot of legal issues out there that need to be discussed in depth.
okay. And it says in the report that we'll take, if there's an opportunity for a majority of the property owners will choose to pay the city in lieu of getting the private contractor. The report states the Bureau of Street Service will be given 3 years to complete the work. If that's the case, what happens if there's a trip and fall in the interim period? Now that we've been notified, does that change our liability issues? I mean, we then can't reject, we have to pay?
Well, I think that it remains the same. We're going to be liable regardless. The fact that we have been made aware of it and we take the interim repairs are made to mitigate the trip and fall. That may include putting asphalt, ramping over, or it may even include having to pull the sidewalk out and putting back in asphalt. The 3-year period, again, is just to give us a window of opportunity. It may be closer to 1 year, it could be 2 years. We figure that even if we did it all by contract, we need a minimum of 1 year just to get the contracts in place. So the 3-year would be the outside window. The liability remains on the city. We're put on notice, but we do make the interim repairs to try to mitigate that safety hazard.
Okay. And what happens if the house is sold again in that 3-year period, which does happen? They flop, they flop them over and sell them again.
Again, the initial property owner, the one that bought that home, the safe sidewalk certificate at that point in time would just be transferred to the new owner, because subsequently, the city has already collected the money to make that
Who would
repair.
police that up? How would you police that? How, it would be the Realtor that's responsible for knowing that it's been sold and the money's on deposit? Contract ad? I mean, who's going to say, we got the money and you don't have to do it now? Who's going to do that?
Again, that would probably fall to our bureau under the fact that if that goes back on the market again, the realtor, whoever that realtor is, advises them, you need to get a safe sidewalk certificate. They would come to the bureau. At that point in time, we would make the inspection, and at that time, we would look at our data records, our records of those properties that have been listed that are included in the program, and we would go ahead and issue a safe sidewalk certificate so that sale could go through.
You create a database then
Yes,
to keep
exactly.
all this record keeping in
Yes.
it. And you say you can do that within the personnel you have?
No, that's the other thing. The issue is I can do it with the workforce, which is the biggest
You can do
portion
the
of it.
work itself?
Yes. We're going to need additional administrative staff to oversee those types of databases and those issues that are going to come before us, and we fully expect that would happen.
Okay, and is that amortized into the cost of the program then, or are we going to eat that in the general fund?
We would certainly try to. Again, because we haven't got that far yet, we really haven't looked at the actual cost of the administrative side because we don't know how successful or how big the program is going to be. Based on, let's say, a very low participation, let's say 60 miles a year, we could probably handle it the first year or so with existing staff. And then you may have to add 1 or 2 additional people. So the cost would be minimal.
Well, my fear is that the participation gets to be very high, and then we're in one of those catch-22s where we got a big program going on and not enough people to do it again, and the backlog gets to be 83 years again.
Yes.
That's a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing you got a bunch of money, but bad thing you're still not getting the work done.
Yeah, and that's our concern. The staffing at whatever level we do, we know how difficult it is right now. We've been through the off-budget process where we've had trouble getting folks to do that work where there's funding available because of the potential deficit in the city. So the city has always been very fiscally responsible, and so...
Say that again for the Daily News.
Yeah. Well, from my standpoint, they have, because the CAO has always said, you know, you don't... They aren't going to let you do anything unless...
No, you don't have to argue with me. It's for the benefit of the Daily News who's listening somewhere in the building. Okay. You told me, and I maybe got the numbers wrong, but in the last decade, the price of cement has gone up 400%, I think, something like that?
It is... I remember the day, I think it was about 5 years ago, we were paying roughly about $48 a cubic yard. We're over $96 a cubic yard. When you go with a short load, you may be paying upwards of $160. So it's very, very expensive.
Very expensive. So anyway, that brings the point is, if someone makes a deposit of $3,500 for today's work, in 3 years from now the price has gone up, then the city general fund has to pay the difference? Because there's no way to go back.
That's a possibility. What we're hoping is through that 3-year window, one of the things we can do to minimize the cost or the inflation factor, you can't always control it, but what we want to do is the 3-year or 2-year window would allow us to eliminate doing the onesies. In other words, we go out on one block, we do one. Well, maybe over that 3-year period, there may be 6 homes that sold in a small geographic area, which minimizes our cost. But we really can't even tell that because we don't know how big the program's going to be. It would certainly be my hope that that would be the way we schedule things. But one of the other things that we've done, and the council approved, is our problem right now with the 50/50 and the reason the cost is so high is because of the short loads that we're doing. You know, they want 9 yards as a full truck. If you don't have 9 yards, you pay a short load and you're paying 2 to 3 times what you should be. And the council approved us to have our own mixing trailer that can mix up to 10 cubic yards, move from job site to job site, eliminates the short loads, drops our concrete costs down because now we're buying it in bulk, the sand, the aggregate, and the concrete, and we're mixing it ourselves manually on the site. So there's a lot of issues when you talk about costs that still need to be vetted before we can give you a really solid idea of where we are.
And on that also vein, last time I think we had a discussion in the budget was you can't get enough aggregate. You're having trouble.
We can't. The aggregate issue is huge. It's huge in our asphalt production. There is a shortage in the Los Angeles area. Most of the aggregate coming in is from outside the LA basin. So that's why on the asphalt site we're doing more and more recycling, as you well know, to minimize that cost. Concrete, that's one of the reasons why we've seen the increase. It's not only the Portland cement that's costing more, because of the building elsewhere in the world, especially in China right now, but it's the aggregate cost, good aggregate.
So with the shortage and problems we're having just keeping up with the program we got, if we kick it up a notch, quite a notch, an additional 30, 40 miles a year maybe, is there enough aggregate to even meet that demand?
Yes.
At what price?
In the short term. Again, we certainly think that we will see a spike in the price. We could see it go over $100 a cubic yard. But that's if we're buying the ready and mixed material. If we're doing it ourselves, we can bring that price down. Hopefully we could keep it in the $90 range. but my crystal ball is really cloudy. These are tough economical questions. Aggregate is just as volatile as oil, and with not a good supply in the LA basin, it really hurts all the surrounding cities.
And my last question is it's a concern I've had with the city attorney for a long time, and that is their opinion that if you drive up to repair a sidewalk and you see that the whole street is broken, you have to fix the whole street.
I'll be real careful with this because I know there's some disagreement. When we go out and do an inspection and we look at that whole block, we will fix everything that is offset. We do not replace good sidewalk.
Right.
We only replace that which is damaged.
Right.
The reality is we have to look from intersection to intersection. So if we get a request for one location on that block and we see 6 others,
Okay.
we need to include those.
And that's my concern in this program. If we have a willing or unwilling, either, doesn't matter, person that's going to
Yep.
pay for one location, and you drive up and find out there's a whole neighborhood full of problems, now your program goes from 30 miles to 50 miles, from 60 miles to 90 miles, whatever, because we know that a quarter of the sidewalks in the city are in bad condition.
Yes.
And so one out of every 4 trips you're going to make, you're going to do a whole block.
Well,
That's on our shoulders now, not
Yeah.
just, you're going to get 3,500 from that one guy.
Yeah,
And the city treasurer eats the rest, right?
well, the reality is that under the point of sale, and again, these are legal issues that I cannot comment on. I don't know, we're certainly going to be more liable. The reality is we need some type of ruling. When we go out and we see that, we can make interim repairs, which technically mitigates the trip and fall, and fix only that one section that property is paying for. We would certainly welcome the city attorney's input on that to
Well, I would
really
like to
tell
have a
us.
discussion with the city attorney
Yeah.
on that, too, because it's an opinion I thought it was stupid from the beginning, but I say that about a lot of city attorney opinions, so I'll stop at that.
Anybody here, city attorney's office?
They just ran out the door.
Okay, Bill, we appreciate what you just shared with us, and Greg, I certainly appreciate your questions. Laura had them all on the side for me to ask, but I'm happy you asked them. Since frankly,
Let me be-
Greg Smith has been with us a long time, and when I came on as chair of this committee, it's one of the discussion points we had is what's the story on that? Where does it go, if anywhere? And we appreciate the work you've done so far. So just pull to the side, Bill, and we'll get a group of folks to say a few words. If we could come up in groups, Mel Wilson, SEIU Local 721, Teresa Sanchez, Wesley Greenwood, Consolidated Board of Realtors. Could those 3 come on up? Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Good afternoon. Teresa Sanchez, SEIU Local 721.
Yeah.
I want to say that I haven't been working on this issue as long as Bill and his staff have, but it's been about 10 years. And this really came from our perspective out of our quality service initiative. We've been working with a number of city departments to identify ways to improve services, save the city money, and do things that bring more direct service into the communities that we serve. And the sidewalk issue has been on my plate, as I say, for almost a decade. It's almost a century-long problem in the city of Los Angeles, and I think that this is really smart public policy. I think this is one way of taking a strategic approach to addressing the problem of unsafe sidewalks. I think that it's probably the only way of really addressing the problem in a comprehensive way. We've worked together on the 50/50 program. It's a wonderful program. But there's no way to general fund it to the level that we need to deal with the problem comprehensively citywide. And this is one way, but through a fee for service, that we can get the work done, get it done in a timely way, we can guarantee the work, and it's really a minimal cost to the property owner, and it's relatively, I believe, painless within the process of a property being sold. I also think it's a good economic development strategy for the city. Everybody's running around talking about economic stimulus right now, and I believe that giving people good jobs and doing a service that the public really needs is probably the best way of getting at that issue. So I would just encourage you to continue to support us and help us move the process along. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Mel Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Smith. Mel Wilson, I represent the Southland Regional Association of Realtors. We have about 12,500 members. It's principally the San Fernando Valley. And I just have to make some points of clarification to Mr. Robertson with respect to the inclusionary or inclusiveness of the task force. How much time do I have?
Keep going. You got a minute and 35
Okay,
seconds.
great. First of all, if you'll take a look at the report states who was invited and who was a member of the committee. And if you'll see the number of folks who were there who were city staffers versus those who were in the private sector. The second part of that is that there was never a question of can we have a minority report. The city staffers put together their recommendations. I sat through a number of those meetings with the legal committee, and I voiced an opinion against a point of sale measure, and the staff said, look, we're directed by council. The council says that it's a point of sale ordinance, and that's all we're going to look at. They went through a whole charade of other options, but the bottom line was that's all they wanted to look at. Now, there's a real estate slump here today. There are over 12% of the properties in Mr. Smith's district that are in foreclosure. There are 22% of the properties that are in short sales. People are upside down. And so to put an additional burden on a property owner when they're already suffering is really just pretty insensitive. So I would say this program is not well thought out. It has not been fleshed out through the neighborhood councils. And I think that's a flaw in the program as well. I think that we need to go back and look at a program that is not point of sale, not mandated as an escrow. It needs to be a voluntary program. We're willing to work with you on that. But the program, the way it's been recommended now, is just totally insensitive to the real world. And yes, we want to see people have good jobs. We like to see people work and get paid. But why take it out of the property owner right now when property owners don't have it? The federal government, the state government, everybody's trying to help property owners now. And the reality is that 25% of the revenue that this city generates annually comes from property owners. So we just recommend that you turn this down, that you send this back out, let us work on a voluntary program, and this point of sale measure really is one that needs to be dropped right now.
Thank you, Mel. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Wesley Greenwood.
Yes, thank you. Just a point for clarification.
Sure. While you're coming up, Victor Veretti, I'm sorry if I got it wrong. James Litz, too. Great.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. We are the Consolidated Board of Realtors, and Realtors are the largest trade organization for African-American real estate professionals in the Los Angeles area. We are opposed to this point of sale point also. It was nice to hear that Mr. Robertson was still open for inputs, but like Mr. Wilson, we feel that the entire process had been flawed. I have some written statements here that I would just like to read. Sure. The responsibility for repairs fall into two categories. Property owners generally are responsible for repairing sidewalks. However, if the damage was caused by root growth from a tree planted by the city, then the city should be responsible, not the homeowners. A point of sale tactic fails, especially in a declining market with relatively few transactions. A point of sale ordinance could bog down the escrow process in a sector of the economy that is currently under siege. We represent in our organizations most of the homes in the area that we service were built in 1926, and all of these palm trees were planted around that time. That's the cause of the sidewalk failure, not anything that the homeowners have done. In a recent survey of neighborhood councils participants, sidewalk repair work was among the highest budget priorities cited. Given their choice of where to cut the budget, city residents felt livable communities should be one of the last areas to see a reduction in funding. By not taking a comprehensive approach Disabled residents remain at a risk, and the city is exposing itself to possible legal actions for failing to comply with the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, Russell.
Thank you.
Please, you're next. Introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm James Litz. I represent the Beverly Hills Greater Los Angeles Association of Realtors, and I thank Public Works Department and the Street Services for allowing me to serve on the task force. It was a very interesting process, and I created some very good relationships with people inside the city. And we appreciate and admire and support the goal of providing safe, accessible sidewalks to the residents of Los Angeles. Pedestrian access and connectivity are integral to the overall transportation solutions as much as subways, light rail, shuttles, bike paths, streets, and buses. However, as you dealt with very painful budget issues this morning, establishing a new program with new personnel, benefits, equipment, and administrative costs should be out of the question. As I see in your agenda today, you are considering ways to enhance the 50-50 program to allow outside funding and discussion of allowing a commercial property to participate. Utilizing existing programs and staff is the way to go. I agree with Mr. Roberts on that point. Utilizing existing staff is the way to go, and you have great programs to accomplish that. Also, Los Angeles has a very active neighborhood councils, Perhaps these groups can be encouraged to monitor the sidewalk conditions in their neighborhoods, eliminating the need for the point-of-sale trigger. Empowering neighborhood councils, quality of life issues such as sidewalks, street lighting, public right-of-way landscaping and maintenance, curb cuts for handicapped access, street furniture, street sweeping, etc. All issues that affect the appearance and livability of neighborhoods. Groups have the opportunity to form benefit assessment districts that will fund neighborhood improvements by giving your residents a definite say in the future and identity of their neighborhoods. And also, with the price of the aggregate going up, maybe it's time to pursue green solutions, permeable sidewalks to allow water to go to the roots of these trees that are instead of them bringing up the sidewalks. Finally, a citywide compliance program could be adopted that would give all property owners all property owners a time certain to bring their sidewalks into safe conditions. If a property owner did not comply by the end of the period, the city could make the repair and place a lien on the property to ensure reimbursements of costs. Thank you for your time here, and I hope you consider this very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments as well. Sure.
I'm Vic Varick. I'm active in a lot of business and local organizations paid by none. But anyhow,
Good public service.
Yeah, this would be a change for the worse, because while you're waiting for a lot of people to sell their homes and get the get the point of sale ordinance going against them, there's so many others that people don't sell for 20, 30 years. A lot of people are going to be tripping on their sidewalks and suing the city. Not only are owners and realtors affected by the point of sale, but as has been mentioned earlier, lenders are. And if you put too much pressure on the lenders, it's going to be a lot harder in the future for people to be able to get the right kind of loans. It's going to be more expensive. And one of the problems with the subprime problem is that a lot of lenders were pushed to try to make it easier for lower income people to get loans. This is going to make it worse in that category. You need to make it easier for homeowners and other property owners to be able to fix the sidewalks, make licenses for various contractors so that the public can go to these contractors and get the work done, and make the permits a lot less expensive. And also, as far as multi-residential properties, need to allow a 100% pass-through. So a lot of mom-and-pop owners can't afford this kind of expense. The RSO rent stabilization ordinance is making it very hard on mom-and-pop owners to fix their properties. Thank you. And I approve this message.
Hope and change again. Okay. Eric Toro, Laura Osaso, if I got it right. I'm sorry for that. And David Kessinger. Eric?
Good afternoon, Eric Toro. I'm a real estate agent. I'm also a realtor. I work in Northeast Los Angeles. My office is in Northeast Los Angeles, and I live there. I think this is a bit misguided. I know that you have position papers from many of the Board of Realtors, but I sell a lot of houses in Highland Park, Glasell Park, Lincoln Heights, and some in Eagle Rock. This has a huge impact on people who are middle and lower income people. $3,500 may not seem a lot to us, but it is a lot of money, especially if you're looking at possibly going into a short sale where the bank already doesn't want you to sell the property, or you're looking at a possible foreclosure where you really have to get out of that property for a number of reasons. One, to see if you can recoup some of the money that's there, and the other thing is to basically not ruin your credit for the next 10 years. I think people have made much better points than I have, and you're going to hear them all, and you certainly have them in writing. But please think about that. This is not the most effective way, and it really puts a burden on those people in this city who can least afford it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. And Laura, you're with the Glendale and Pasadena Foothills Association of Realtors. Welcome.
Yes, I am. And both of those associations have parts of their territory and members that do business in the city of Los Angeles, so we would be dealing with this should this pass. And while we agree that sidewalks need to be repaired in the city and absolutely applaud you for trying to get to that, we believe the point of sale solution is not the right one, that it is both too expensive for the homeowner as well as expensive to the city. Staff said today that the average cost is $3,500. That was last year. Also, you'll see, if you read your report carefully, that they have had experience with the 50-50 program, and that the cost for that 50-50 program, because they're piecemeal, has doubled. So think of not at $3,500, but think of the piecemeal approach that is inherent with a point-of-sale program at a $7,000 cost per homeowner. We're not talking about a $50 gas shutoff valve. This is a whole lot of money. And if you will remember what life was like when you bought your first house and how every penny counted, whether you were selling it to buy another one or selling or buying it in the first time, and trying to come up with that kind of money, even if you split it between the two of you, is a whole lot of money. It's also too expensive for the city. If you are charging a set fee, whether it's $3,500 or $7,000 or whatever, and you're going to wait 3 years to repair that, costs are going to go up. There is no way that they cannot go up. You need to get it. You need to just expect that they are going to go up, and the city will be paying part of this. We believe that there are better ways. We've given you any number of solutions, whether you're mandating it so people in a prioritized way, through the council districts, through the neighborhood councils, through a bond, through expansion of your 50-50 program, through benefit assessment districts. There are any number of ways that truly were not discussed in the task force, and we believe that those are better ways for the city to and should consider them. In this era, with the precariousness of the housing market today, with the budget deficits that are projected for the city, with the hiring freeze that the mayor's calling for, we believe the point of sale is just too expensive and not your better solution. And we're looking forward to working with you for other solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. David Kissinger from the South Bay Association of Realtors. Hey, reincarnated.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon. Thank you, council members. David Kissinger. Following on the comments of my colleagues that you've heard, I also sat on the program structure subcommittee with Mr. Robertson's team. I do appreciate the effort to sit down with street services and have that dialogue to find where is that solution, what is the best, what truly works to help get sidewalks repaired in the city. Point of sale is not that solution. It just is not going to work, and it won't help the city get to where it needs to go. You really need to do two things. You need to identify the site, and you need to allocate resources to fix it. Point of sale fails on both counts just because by nature it is just so inefficient. Based on a lot of what you've heard before, point of sale is by nature a very inefficient, piecemeal, haphazard way to identify a property. I think Mr. Robertson used the term onesies, and that's a very apt term. There will always be onesies. Always. In some cases, there are some neighborhoods that turn over barely the majority of their housing stock once every 15 years. That's a very long time to be holding on to somebody's money and waiting for enough properties in that area to come available in order to reduce the cost. Again, moving forward, the 3-year window to hold on to money, while it may be that that's the time needed to allocate those resources, it still is not acceptable to hold on to someone else's that money. And then make the change later, the liability still exists, also because of time value of money and because of natural increases in resource allocation costs. There is a gap. Who is going to pay that gap? Will the city go to the homeowner and ask for more money? Or will the city need to dip into the general fund or into street services operating budget? So there's still a significant impact that hasn't been studied. And all of this for a program that, based on our calculations from the staff report, will mitigate barely 1% of the existing 4,600-mile backlog of broken sidewalks. And that's not including the currently good sidewalks now. They're being pushed up as we speak and will be identified in the future. So again, to echo my colleagues' comments, we do want to work with the city and with street services to find that solution, to come up with a way to fix the sidewalk and have a usable, safe sidewalk in the community. This isn't it, and we hope that you'll continue the dialogue to find out what is the correct one.
Okay,
So, thank you very much.
comments. Now, that was 7-1 there, 7 Realtors and 1 SEIU. Now, we have Jim Mcquisten, who's checked 2 boxes against proposal and general comment. So you're up, Jim.
Jim Mcquisten. I'm one of those people who went through the Depression and just barely saved our house. And we had to fix our sidewalks because the city said if we don't fix them, they're going to fix it and charge us a lot of money. And we got them fixed at a much more reasonable cost by just hiring a contractor. And so I got into this, I think, at both of your insistence. And being a legal person, I got on the law committee, and I actually went down and looked in the law books, and the law books say point of sale is against the law, and 50-50 is against the law. And I was very surprised. And it turns out that in 1902, this California Supreme Court ruled against the city of Redondo Beach, who did exactly what we're doing right now. And they said, that's not the way it works, fellows. And so I researched a little bit more on this, and I found out that the ruling is still good today. So what I did was I actually went to the various budgeting people in the city, and I actually got out some what we can get out of our computer without a lot of exercise, and I found out that the average cost for a 60-foot homeowner, which is in the poorer sections of town, let me see if I can read it here, it's $9 and some odd a month. Well, gee whiz, you know, you can afford that if you're going out and buying an HD TV and these sorts of things. I actually took the budgeted number and the number of miles that was budgeted for that. It doesn't work out to $3,500 on the 60-foot lot. It's a lot less. And that's if the sidewalk only lasts 20 years. And in our neighborhood, which is an older neighborhood, the sidewalks weren't as heavy as they are now. And when people drive their trucks over them, they break them up. And that's something that bothers me a lot. So I think, really, that point of sale is no good at all. Our house was bought in 1920 in January, and we're still there. Okay, so that means, what, 84 years you'd wait to fix our sidewalk.
88.
88. Yes, I'm sorry, 88 years. And so it's just not the way to work. And I'm budget conscious, as you both know, and I don't like the exposure of the city on sidewalks. And when it's very, very clear that you own out to the center of the street in most places, and that the sanitation department is coming around and telling you, hey, if we find roots out in the middle of the street going into our sewers, we're going to charge you for fixing that. So you better go out to the center of the street and fix that yourself. So I think that is a much bigger charge than fixing your sidewalks. And if people realize that they are supposed to do that by the 1911 Improvement Act, which has been gone to the Supreme Court, there's no problem at all. Now, I heard Mr. Parks in the last budget hearing agonizing over this, and I'm sure that Mr. Parks does not know that he probably owns that sidewalk, and there's only an easement that allows people to walk over it. So I think if we publicize this, and I'm also on the publicity committee, I think we can get people, just like we got them to pay for the pickup of the sanitation refuse. I don't think there's any problem at all getting them to pay $9 and some odd a month. Now, the city could make a loan to those people, say, hey, we'll loan you the money at a certain commercial rate, and you can pay it so much a month if you want to, but we're going to stick to what the state law says. However, the state law says once the superintendent of streets finds that this is decrepit, the superintendent only has so many days to fix it, one way or the other. He can send a notice to the people and tell them to fix it, and if they don't fix it within a certain time, he has to fix it within a certain time, and it's not 1 to 3 years. And I, as an engineer, also believe, because I've bought cement lately in small quantities, and a person can buy cement, and he can hire people from this, that, and the other place, and you can get a no-fee permit from the city to fix that. So I think some of the people who have testified today have not done the groundwork to say, look, this is a tempest in a teapot.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Bill, come on up, but we see the great city attorney back there. You want to comment on any of what you've heard, either on the Squawk Box or in the room? Well, we'd like to get a vibe out of you of some sort. Come on up.
Come on, Chris.
Come on, Chris. You're on the job, babe. You've heard a lot of comments. You've heard Mr. Robinson and his initial comments.
Actually, I missed Mr. Robertson's comments because I was out in the hall dealing with street furniture, but
I took the fifth, Chris.
I certainly appreciate
what's your
that.
first reaction of this whole process we've been going through?
Well, obviously, one of the benefits of having been around here as long as I have, the problem with I've been Public Works General Counsel for a quarter of a century, so
25 years.
25 years.
So you've caught the last 10 years of Mr. Bill.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was the middle of the last century, not the recent
pretty close.
quarter.
The struggle with infrastructure is certainly there. I think I'd have to take a look at the point of sale issues because I think, quite honestly, point of sale has been used on a number of times and nobody's challenged it legally, and so I'd be a little bit surprised that we couldn't do it on point of sale. Whether that's a good idea or a bad idea is obviously for the policymakers to determine in terms of that. The 50-50 program, right? The 50-50 program is nothing more than a contractual arrangement between the city and a private property owner. No law prevents the city from engaging in that sort of activity. There is an anomaly. The state law does require all property owners to take care of their own sidewalk. Somewhere back in predating even my tenure with Public Works, a decision was made somewhere by the then city council to put an exception to that inside the municipal code, which has sort of thwarted our ability to do that, and that is the exception for tree root damage. Council certainly has the ability to change that if it so wishes as the policymaker, and put the onus back where the state law has for a century put it, which is on the homeowner. To actually be responsible for their sidewalk, and that would eliminate the need to do on sale, because then the street services could cite a sidewalk for being in a dangerous condition and require the property owner to do it then and there as opposed to when due on sale. There have been bond measures proposed at various times. I know Councilmember Smith was involved. Those are tough things to try and sell. It's a very, very difficult situation. Legally, you have a number of ways to go. I think you have a lot of freedom to make the decision, as the policymakers for the city, how you want to handle the problem. But there is little doubt that the problem certainly exists.
Mr. Smith, you want to ask me?
Yeah, just 2 points. One is, we discussed earlier, your opinion that if his crews drive up to repair a sidewalk and see the whole block is bad, they have to do the whole block.
There's an issue with that, and that isn't my opinion. I think that's the opinion of my office.
City Attorney's Office.
The city attorney's office, and I think it basically has to do with the liability issue of notice. There's no legal requirement to do it. You can continue to take the risk that nobody trips and falls on the other areas that are visible to city. But the argument will be made if somebody does trip and fall and they're able to demonstrate that a crew was out, right next door to that location, that the city was on what we would term in the legal profession constructive notice, if not actual notice, of the defect. Because before someone can sue the city has to have notice of the defect, whether it's a pothole, a raised sidewalk, a tree that potentially falls on a car. If we have no notice that there's a dangerous condition, that is a defense to somebody who might be,
But not a
hurt
foolproof defense,
Not a
because we sit on the committee and we've settled a lot of those lawsuits.
Correct. And
many.
it's not a foolproof defense, but it is a defense. And so I think our office has advised street services that if you are in the field and you notice it, then the city is put on constructive notice of these other deficiencies, and therefore, to eliminate that liability, you would need to fix that. Legally, the policy-wise, you can choose not to do that. I don't think again, it's a policy decision for the city council to make, and obviously for the Bureau of Street Services to make as to whether or not they want to take that tact. The only downside to only fixing the one location is it potentially exposes the city to liability on those other locations.
My concern in this program is if we start picking and choosing, cherry picking a quarter of the properties in the city of LA that end up in a sale somewhere, and we're hitting now those other properties, this program, it balloons and it becomes burdensome. And that's my concern. We're taking what we're currently doing and multiplying it by 3 or 4, and then you have the potential of multiplying it again by just driving up to a neighborhood and say, oh, God, the whole neighborhood's bad. Now we got to do everything. That's my biggest concern.
Well, the point of sale, to be honest with you, and maybe I'm, again, behind the curve on this one, but certainly if it becomes the homeowner's responsibility to replace the sidewalk under an A permit, nothing gets done by the Bureau, and so the city doesn't get technically put on notice as to what's going on other places.
It does, because there's the program is either you do it yourself or you give the city the money and let them do it. And I can guarantee you more than 50% of the people can say, I don't want to deal with it.
Correct.
I got to sell. I'm in escrow. I'm about to move. I'm not going to deal with it. So they're going to give us a check, and then becomes the probability that it's going to be a force multiplier of the problem.
Well, once again, as the policy makers for the city, the council could decide not to run it that way, and could decide, like they do with safety glass, with low flow shower heads and low flow toilets. Those things have to be done on a due on sale situation. I remember there was a big brouhaha, because I remember I had to do it on sliding glass doors when you sold your house, to replace sliding glass doors and to put tempered glass in those sliding glass doors. And that was a big expense when I sold my house in Woodland Hills. And, but that was my requirement. It wasn't the city going out and doing it. So again, there's the fortunate thing and the unfortunate thing that there are multiple solutions to this problem. And the question becomes for the 15 council members is to try and pick that solution that meets the needs of the public and the city.
Let me ask you one more question on that, and I'll be finished. But some people said that we want a volunteer program. To both sides, a voluntary program ain't going to work. At the same time, a mandatory program has too many other problems dealing with the economy that's going on, the economic impact of low-income families, all those other issues that a mandatory has. Now, let me ask you, would it be in our best, well, that's for us to say, is it legal to issue a revenue anticipation bond that would then mandatorily do all of them and put it on the property tax at sale?
Boy, that's the first time I've heard of that. I have no doubt that you could raise a bond. I'm not sure. I'd have to check with our bond unit.
The nice thing is, as a revenue anticipation bond, we don't have to do 218 election, for one. 2, it would be mandatory that it be done at sale, but the homeowner, it goes on the property, the next guy.
Correct.
And it's amortized out over 20 years rather than having to pay the $3,500. So the low-income families have an opportunity to amortize it out. It's done on their property tax on a yearly basis. Basically, we're doing a no-interest loan, basically.
Yeah, to be honest, council member, I could not give you a definitive legal answer on that. We do have people in our office who do deal with the bonds, would be in a much better position to tell you whether or not that was legal. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like it should be, but it is so technical in that area that I'd be taking a shot in the dark.
I think these are the kind of things, and it was briefly brought up. We could do a benefit assessment district, as the county did for the fire department.
Right.
These are the kind of issues I think we should look at, because if you look at the average homeowner in certain parts of town can't afford this. There's no way. And I'm not ready to start giving away the city treasury and waiving those fees for those people, saying, some people get off light, but we're still going to fix our sidewalk. That's not right. At the same time, the 1911 Act says everyone's responsible for their property. So how do we help people in those situations? And at the same time, to the board, realize that they don't need to be our policemen for this. They do enough of our police work, and they don't get anything out of it. So there should be I think we just got to find a better way to do this. To both sides, I say to you, I think we can find a better way if we continue to talk about this. But to those who are opposed, we have to do it. We can either do it the harsh way, and that is the 1911 Act, so you're going to do it whether you like it or not, or we can find a program that works. And so to you on the other side, you say, let's make this work. My challenge to you is, let's be creative and find a way to make this work. There's a lot of great minds in this town. I'm sure somebody can figure this out.
I think this was incredible what Smith said, because he's been with this issue a lot longer than I have. And I just want to get it resolved one way or the other and move forward with it, to be candid with you. And what he challenged the realtors out there is to work with us and come up with something that makes sense, that can work. We're not just whistling Dixie at this. I certainly have some sympathetic notion to a homeowner who bought the house in a great city, put in all those ficus trees and other things, and created all those root issues. I mean, let's put the burden where the truth is, though it is the homeowner's responsibility. We got all kinds of ways we don't do it or get around it or whatever. But we need to address some of Mr. Smith's issues right out the gate before we take any action. We need to report back. Bill, would you respond to everything you've heard so far? Since you have really, and I just, everybody needs to know this, you're passionate about a lot of things. One of the things that he's very passionate about is getting our streets done. And literally, he's been in 3 of my neighborhood councils explaining the status of our streets so that the community realize I don't play politics with streets. I'm not that type of politician. I don't believe in that. I believe in doing it because it has to be done for the reasons that you've put forward. So you're a very honest, straightforward, candid guy. One thing I want to make sure you do is go to neighborhood councils and make presentations on this too. In my district, I got 8 neighborhood councils. Every one of them is engaged one level or another of community activity. They're really sincere folk. And I know they would love to participate in a real healthy discussion on this. But react to what Mr. Smith said and the rest of the folks that spoke.
I'm claiming victory right now because, again, the key to this is the discussion itself. And I really appreciate Mr. Smith's comments. I think that bond is something that could possibly work if we get the buy-in. Yeah. That's something that hasn't been looked at because there hasn't been the driving force to do that lately. The reality is I appreciate the real estate industry's comments, and I don't disagree with any of them. My goal is to help find a solution to a $1.2 billion issue in the city. I think we all agree we've got 35 years, and I personally have 25 years of experience of what doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. Right. And I think Mr. Smith hit it right on the head. You cannot get voluntary compliance. Right. Don't even think about that. I don't care how much outreach you do, it's not going to happen. Right. And we've proven that with the 50-50, because one of the things we do is when one person buys in, we notify all the other property owners, do you want to buy in? To drive the cost down. And sometimes we get other folks that buy in, others we don't. My recommendation to the committee would be for us to get with the CAO, the City Attorney's Office, and anybody else that would, again, like to join us. The folks from the Real Estate Committee, we have subcommittees. We can bring those folks back in. I think we all agree that the adjacent property owner is the person that's going to be responsible, but how do we assist them and assist the city itself in finding funding to solve the problem? And I have no problem going out to the neighborhood councils once we have more direction on a policy And again, this was to start the discussion, so I'm well pleased that we've moved this far.
I'd like to see us maybe take out a half dozen ideas to neighborhood councils and say, here's a menu, what do you think works? And kind of use it as a polling service, really.
And just to put some historical context around the problem that was created, it's a perfect example of the law of unintended consequences, and also of when you have a short-term issue, be careful that you're not creating a long-term problem, because what happened was the reason that the law was changed to put that sort of exception in the municipal code was that at the time in the 70s the city had money and had a sidewalk program, and so the city council at that time decided that they would put the exception in for root issues and make that the city's responsibility instead of the homeowner's responsibility. And with all due respect, that little decision that was made in the 70s has grown to Bill's $1.2 billion issue out there today. So it is really an object lesson, and to be careful so that and try and look long term. So whatever solution ultimately gets decided by the city council needs to be really well thought out. And Councilman, I think having a menu of potential solutions and sort of vetting them all at the same time is a very good idea.
But I want to put more challenges on you as well. As we go forward, and we'll continue this item, get some of these ideas out of your legal team that you said needed to be fleshed out, and get that input with Bill.
Sure.
And then the Realtors, we challenge you. David Kissinger, you know the city, you worked here. You know the mechanics and the process and how things happen. So we look forward to the leadership of you and the Realtors in general participating in this process. I think Mr. Smith made it very clear. We have to do something. And neither he nor I want to retire out of here and leave the problem for the next generation, okay? It's time for action by our great city at this point.
Yeah, if I could ask Mr. Smith to just email me a blurb on that, and I will take that to our bond people to get a definitive answer as to whether or not that is legally permissible.
And Realtors in the room, please, work. David will help be the point person on it. I know he doesn't want to overly burden himself, but David Kissinger is very equipped to figure out how we move forward here and how we make the energy go and sit with Bill. What I'd like to ask you, Bill, when you're ready, when do you think you need to come back with some more pointed stuff?
Well, what I would like to do is I'm certainly going to need, as I mentioned previously, the help of the city attorney,
Sure.
the CAO and the CLA, because the reality is my staff doesn't have that expertise that's really needed to look at these different options.
The CLA, they want to say anything?
And what I would like to do is reconvene probably the legal issues subcommittee and maybe the program structure committee, and invite the additional real estate folks from the valley who didn't get the opportunity the first time to sit in with us and throw things out there, and let's have a discussion. Let's keep this discussion going. It's only taken me a long 12 years to get this far.
Well, I'd like
so
you to
I'm
also
pleased.
come before a couple of my neighborhood councils that are very engaged in this issue. The Mar Vista one in particular would be interested in this. Maybe use them as a sounding board to get ideas, and maybe pick a neighborhood council in different parts of the city as well.
Glad to do that.
How much time do you think before you come back with something?
I'd like 60 days, if I could get 60 days.
Is that okay with you?
60 days or?
Dog days.
Maybe we laughed on that one. 60 days, so be it.
Yes.
And do get the other parts of the government involved in it, and do deal with the Realtors and see where we are.
Be glad to.
Thank you all very much for that.
Thank you.
Opportunity to have 60 days.
Very good.
Okay, what do we have left?
Item 3 and item 4.
Item 3, okay.
Item 3, motion, Gruel Smith, relative to instructing the Bureau of Street Services to report in regard to the issues involved with allowing alternative funding sources to substitute for current private property owner 50% match under the 50/50 sidewalk repair program and related matters.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Councilman Smith, Ron Olive with Street Services.
Do I put 3 and 4 together, or are they?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure,
3 and 4?
they're pretty quick.
Okay. And we'll be joining with item 4, motion, Garcetti Reyes, relative to directing the Bureau of Street Services to make an exception to the citywide 50/50 sidewalk repair program to allow non-residential property owner to participate in connection with sidewalk repairs of sidewalk that fronts Park Drive and Glendale Boulevard between the intersection of Lemoyne and the property line of 1120 North Glendale Boulevard.
Okay, let's deal with number 4 first.
What was that?
On number 4, the specific exception for a commercial property to be eligible for the 50/50 program. Unfortunately, no excuse on our part, but that motion is about a year old, and we just recently became aware of it. So by the time we put in a quick report, but then we researched it with CD13 and looked at our records, and the work was actually done under the general fund sidewalk repair program last year. So we'd like to recommend a receive and file on that, so we don't have to worry about the commercial eligibility for 50/50.
So moved.
Okay.
Now we're back to 3.
And on number 3, we have 2 separate issues that the motion asks us to report back on. The first one, the alternative sources of funding. And again, this is not to expand the number of miles that get repaired under the 50/50 program. The city 50% contribution is fixed under the budget. This really looks at something we've been asked over the 3-year life of the program several times. I say mostly by neighborhood councils. They wanted to use some of their funding to help partially or fully subsidize the homeowner's 50% obligation. And unfortunately, we've had the direction for the full 3 years, strictly residential property owners and strictly 50/50, no other sources of funding. So we needed this technical correction and approval from the council to allow this to occur. So the first thing we did, because neighborhood councils, again, were the main driving force with this, we met with our friends from the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, and we checked with both our councils for Public Works and for Dunn, and we wanted to make sure this was not a legal problem, and they quickly said it was not. It's strictly a policy issue. So we developed a working group with Dunn and with some neighborhood council representatives, and we kicked around all kinds of ideas on criteria for eligibility, from fixing the worst first in their districts, or maybe the worst areas, or a number of criteria, income levels, and we figured we got to be above a reproach here. So we quickly said, let's just look at a program that's open to all residential constituents with an outreach program, and select the successful winners, if you will, through a lottery system. Okay, so, and I think we all agreed on that. The only thing we left for the individual interested neighborhood councils was to set the individual reimbursement limits, either a dollar amount or a percentage amount. So they do have that flexibility. And also, we were very concerned because we don't have any administrative staff for the 50/50 program. We're absorbing that. We wanted to make sure that we weren't part of that reimbursement and verification and paperwork, if you will. So the part for street services is the same. We are getting the full amount up front. And when the work is completed, we're just providing a receipt to both Dunn and to the neighborhood council and to the property owner. So then they work directly with the neighborhood council to get reimbursed.
How do you determine which property owner would be eligible for it or not?
Again, it's the one criteria that we're requiring, and Dunn and the neighborhood council focus group agreed to, is that it's open to everyone. They have to, through their newsletters or through their email blast, they announce when their lottery is going to happen. And again, as long as they have the minimum damage criteria, again, a quarter-inch offset or whatever other offset we deem requires repair during our normal program, they're going to make it open to everybody who wants to participate. And again, depending on how much money they want to set aside for this program, if their name is drawn, they win. If not, they don't win.
If they win, then their 50% would be paid for by that lottery drawing?
Partially or fully, depending on what that neighborhood council wants to put forward.
Criteria set out.
Correct.
And you will be comfortable that their outreach will go to every resident in the district? Because some people will complain, I didn't know about it, wasn't participating.
Of course, we're going to get Dunn's help on verifying that, but again, we're not asking for anything above their normal outreach program. Again, newsletters, email blasts, however they notify their constituency.
Another just sidebar question, not that particular issue, but we are in a budget crisis. We're looking at $70 million deficit half a year, maybe 140 altogether. Is the 50/50 program impacted by this as you see it when you're working up your budget numbers?
By this particular initiative?
By the whole 50/50 program?
No, this change, again, proposed starting in 08-09, it wouldn't affect the 50/50 program. Whatever the council wants to set aside for 50/50 next year, this would work with any budget amount.
Good.
There's also some other sources of funding that may be eligible, various trust funds, what have you. We just also want to ask that street services be given the authority to, on a case-by-case basis, allow those funds to help subsidize if they're eligible. So we'll verify that for you. So that's our second recommendation. The second part of that motion that we reported on was to allow commercial property to be eligible for 50/50, and we unfortunately have to recommend that you not approve that because at this point, again, as it has happened over every year, there are way more interested residents, residential property owners interested than we have a budget for. This year, we actually had to close the program down in November for the July to June fiscal year. We had over 900 folks receive estimates, and the full 500 plus folks sign agreements by Thanksgiving. So today, for fiscal year 08-09, we actually have a waiting list of over 400 residential property owners. So if we allow commercial property owners in, it's going to defer their ability to participate even further. So we have to recommend, if you so choose, to not allow commercial properties to be eligible at this point.
Well, I agree with everything I think you said, and I like the lottery concept because I was always concerned about how you equitably do that and how you not make sure that they're not doing it for their friends or their board or whatever. So I think that does that. One concern I have, though, is some of these projects are very expensive. I got one in my neighborhood that the sidewalk is up probably 3 feet from an old oak tree or something that's been there 100, 200 years, whatever. So how do you, can you set a limitation at the top level of how much you would allow them to do too? Because I mean, one project could eat up the entire neighborhood council budget if you're not careful.
And again, that's a point we had a discussion on the 3 or 4 meetings we did have, and that is the one point of flexibility that we do want to leave to each individual neighborhood council, because as you've heard, 3,500 may be the average. You may have some that are less than 1,000, but I've heard of $25,000, $30,000 bills. So if the neighborhood council wants to set aside $30,000 without a limit, it may be one property.
Could be, yeah.
And they're going to be well informed through the outreach program that we're going to participate with done on letting these. And in fact, I think they're right now putting together some groups of neighborhood councils so we can start informing everybody if this does pass.
Okay, good.
Let me go back to your stats again. The program shut down by Thanksgiving because how many have participated in it?
What we found over the 3-year program is roughly 60% of those that have asked for estimates and received estimates actually sign agreements. So we knew that the 13 miles we were funded for this year, we had maybe 500 to 550 properties that could participate with the given budget. So by early mid-November, we already had over 900 estimates.
So frankly, what you're telling me is that for the next fiscal year, more or less, there's only room for maybe 50 or 100 more.
Well, we have 400 and some odd now signed up. Again, depending on what's budgeted next year, if we even have a program.
Right.
Assuming it's the same as this year, we could go as high as 500 more folks that can receive estimates after today. And that's something we want to make the neighborhood councils aware of, that ask for estimates now. I think we've in the past only opened it up July 1st. I think we want to start earlier, and so we can start the work earlier, because we've been starting later in the fiscal year and then having to really throw a lot of resources at the end of the fiscal year to get everything done by the guaranteed June 30th date.
Yeah.
So those are things we want to work out. The date the lottery is set, it has to be early enough so that if someone does win, they can still sign up and not get shut out for that fiscal year.
Right.
So it can't be in the fall because it'll be too late.
Well, you certainly got it down and know the mechanics of it. Question, I'm thinking of directing this to go to the Education and Neighborhood Council Committee for more involvement. Is there a problem with that?
Not at all.
Okay, Mr. Smith, what do you think?
Last question, a concern I have now, are we going to overburden the system? If you're already, and as I recall, all 3 years you've oversubscribed. Now we're going to put in another chunk of money that's available to residents, and are we going to then overburden the system to the point you can't even do them?
Well, again, the additional funding sources will only be supplementing, subsidizing, whatever the word is, for the property owners 50%.
I understand, but you're making it available to more people that currently couldn't do it probably. And that extra money is going to help them get into the system now, whereas before you didn't have them because they couldn't afford it, even the 50%. So what I'm thinking is you're going to expand the system now, and you're at already oversubscribed status 3 years running. Even if you add 10% in, which I think is probably light, but even if 10%, you're adding 40 or 50 more people in.
That's certainly a probability. We may have to close the program down earlier.
So are we now, by our own success, breeding discontent.
Raising expectations. and not
Yeah, see,
delivering.
that's what concerns me. And maybe the better route would be to allow, well, let's try it for a while, but I think we're going down a path that unintended consequences again, that we may a year from now go, oh, holy, look what we just did, you know. We got a big problem. We got 1,000 people now mad at us because they can't get to them.
Okay, well, we can hold that thought on that, but Realtors, we need your help on the other aspect of how we can deal with this. Before we actually take any action, Mr. Jim over there has got a card in for this one. Come on up. Jim Mcquisten.
Seeing as how he's coming up, I'm taking the pace of Tom LaBonge. The city of Los Angeles in the 1920s and 30s had an Office of Efficiency. It was actually a city department, and the head of the department was named Mcquisten. Any relatives?
You know, I'll tell you a story. I'm a camellia grower. I have 3,000 camellias in my backyard.
Chameleons?
Camellias, yes.
Camellias.
Camellias.
Plant. The flower.
Plants, yes.
Lovely. Read that.
And I was looking through the Huntington book that William Hertrick wrote, a volume of 3 books on the camellias in the Huntington Gardens. And I was going through them, and they're alphabetical. And I came to a Mcquisten camellia. Mcquisten. So I rushed over to the Huntington and looked in their records, and they couldn't tell me where they got that plant. For a long time, you know, we were the only Mcquistens in Southern California. And there are many, many, many Mcquistens in Pennsylvania. Our family came from Pennsylvania. So I can't really say. There was a Nan Mcquisten in here in the 30s, but that was the only Mcquisten we knew.
Very good.
Okay.
We're McDonald's of Slate. This is our tartan. People wonder why I always wear this tie. Okay. What I wanted to do was to read into the record what the Supreme Court said, but it's very short. It says, a general authority to lay out, open, repair, and improve streets and sidewalks is conferred upon the trustees of cities, but the mode of exercising the power is prescribed by the Vrooman Act. That's actually the 1911 Act, and its various amendments. This is a general law in force in cities, and under its provisions, the cost of grading and opening streets must be assessed upon the lots fronting on such streets, or upon the land of a defined district. In no event can it be made a charge upon the ordinary revenue. Now, we're talking about ordinary revenue. So that means if we had the neighborhood council, which came out of the ordinary revenue, that's where they got the money. They essentially, somebody like myself who would read this would have to go down to the Superior Court and say, no, you can't do that. However, let's suppose somebody gave some money to a property owner and said, you can only use this money to fix your sidewalk. Then it wouldn't have gone through the general fund. So therefore, he could say, hey, now I can afford to fix my sidewalk. So there are some ways that this could be done. But when I read this, I thought, holy Toledo, you know, we've got to rein in. And as we just heard, the city attorney say, well, we don't think anybody would sue us over this. That's no way to run the city. We really want to do what's right. So we have to think all the time on the 50-50 program that it's suspect now. And we have to find out ways that we could get some money. Now, as far as the bonding issue is concerned, the city can borrow money at a very low rate. And they can put it out at a commercial rate and say, hey, look, we'll loan you the money to fix your sidewalk at a certain higher rate. And so we're actually not losing anything on the loan because we're making a little money on the loan. But we have to do something like that other than this, because sooner or later, it's going to happen. It happened already in the Plum Committee. They got caught on on a zoning issue. We don't want any more catches in the city, because I think the city is run very, very cleanly, and people work very, very hard, and we don't want any stigma attached to the city that we're doing something unlawful. And this is a long-standing Supreme Court, and we have a rule in law that we don't countermand a Supreme Court decision, except maybe if it's Plessy versus Ferguson. But it took a long time for that to happen, and it hasn't taken that long on this particular one. And it's the same law. It hasn't been changed since that time. So there's no way that we can get around this other than figuring out a creative way to finance. But when I figured that this is only $9.60 a month, $9.60 a month, that's less than cigarettes or whatnot. What are we all being so namby-pamby about these people that haven't fixed their sidewalks? The reason why we couldn't get bond issues done before was people said, I fixed my sidewalk, I don't want to pay for that guy's sidewalk, get him to do it, So we really have to, and we have that meat right in the 1911 Act. It's just ironclad.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. I'm going to move forward with setting it to the committee of the Education and Neighborhood Committee. Great. Okay. All right.
So are we merely referring, or are we also recommending
Yeah.
approval of the
Right.
recommendations in the Bureau of Street Services report?
Right. As courtesy, then we want them to get their finger in it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much. Appreciate what you shared with us, too. Bill, I know that Richard Alicon, who couldn't make this meeting, has a whole series of questions, which I would like you to get with him and see how they fit within the package. Okay. Is there any other public comment? Any other issues on the agenda that we need to work with?
That is the entire agenda.
Okay. Meeting's over. Have a great night.